wonderful evening. Spring is almost here, marching the 4th. Wanted to let y'all know that we will be releasing the information for our annual Pi Day sale on Monday. Pi Day is March 14th, 3.14. We have a one-day sale running, and all that information will be released on Monday. So watch our social media outlets and our website for all the details. We are going to make a change to next week's night school. It was set to be the traditional tools. However, we're going to change that and do a full overview of all version 10 features in honor of Pi Day. As for tonight's night school episode, number 10, is Curved Paths Part 2. We're going to be covering the fixed interval float tool, the adjuster tool, and we're going to touch on compound push. All ways that you're able to create curved pathways. Alright. Looks like we might be having some technical difficulties. Looks like we're up and running here. All right, so let's dive right in. For an example, I'm going to start with the fixed interval float. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a arc here, and we're just going to use the fixed interval float tool to flex this arc. I'm going to put my arc down here, select it. I'm going to select my fixed interval float tool. It's this tool right here. This tool functions much like the morph tool. You have a handle on each performer, and you're able to remove handles. You have an option for curved shape. You have an option for locked intervals showing the paths and showing symbols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just strip everything down. If I didn't want to cancel that tool, strip everything down so I only have two handles. I'm going to shift click to add one back, and then I'm going to just invert this arc. Okay. So as you can see here, I've got curved pathways. What happens is the performer that is selected with this blue concentric circle is identified as the person that is going to take a straight line path. And anybody outside of the performer is going to take a curved path in order to make sure that their interval is actually staying the same throughout the entire transition. If I were to use the morph tool directly instead of the fixed interval float tool, let's just strip this down. If I were to do the same thing with the morph tool, as you can see, the intervals between the performers will compress as they get closer to the pinnacle of them flipping the arc. In our fixed interval float tool, that allows you to create a curved path and keep your intervals exactly the same throughout the entire transition. So now I'm creating the same transition, going from an arc to an arc with the fixed interval float tool. It's maintaining the interval between the performers and thus creating your curved pathway. You can click and drag the concentric circle to change the person that is going to be taking a straight line path. As you can see here, I have a straight line path, and now it's going to be curving these performers here. You can see it updates live as you drag the performer ID circle around. You can use it to create a custom type shape as well. I'm getting outside of my step range. As you can see, I'm getting my flashing indicator in my console. Get it to where you flex it around and everybody's taking a curved path in order to maintain that interval. If you have any questions while we're having the episode, just please type them into the chat there. We'll come back around and answer them when we have a moment. All right. So that pretty much covers the fixed interval float tool. It functions very, as I said, very similar to the morph tool. It just gives you the ability to lock the intervals, or it locks the intervals throughout the entire transition. All right. Let's take a look at the next tool, the adjuster tool. If you don't know about the adjuster tool, it is very powerful because it has so many different functions in it that it can do. Let's just take a look here, put in out a couple of different forms to work with here. Our adjuster tool is right here above your set reference. Here's our adjuster tool. When you open your adjuster tool, this tool is unique in the fact that you don't have to have any performer selected in order to turn it on. And it will allow you to click on any performer and then simply click and drag it. Basically, you can place it wherever you want, and it's going to show you the pathway. It allows you to just basically move anybody anywhere. Now, we do have a couple of options here. We have an edit path and an edit steps and a deselect option. If I choose deselect, it's going to deselect just this performer that I had selected. Also, if I chose to select a range of people and select my adjuster tool, it's going to do whatever we have or whatever we do to one performer to everybody. So it has basically two different modes, either a group mode or an individual mode. Alright, so let's take this for an example. I've shifted this section here, and I actually want to edit the pathway. So when I click Edit Path, it's going to put red dots down and red handles. The dot that you see here is going to identify the actual step that they are taking. So we have 16 counts, so it's going to be 16 steps between here and there. I have a handle on each of those, so I can actually click and drag this out. Or I can shift click to remove handles to give me, or choose fewer, give me a little more fine tuning on my pathway. I can choose to make that a curved path. And now while I edit this pathway, as you can see here, each one of these dots is the step. So it gives me the ability to see each and every step that I'm editing. Once I get done editing that, I can choose to turn off the edit path, and it will keep that path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, holding my shift key, select these 6 performers here, and I'm actually going to edit the pathway for all of them. So what it's going to do is it's going to give me handles on one of the performers, and then I'm going to click and drag them, edit them, and it's going to actually edit all performers that I have selected. It's going to edit their pathway. I can test animate that. So it gives you the ability to edit paths individually or in groups without actually having to exit the tool itself. So you can do any type of scatter function that you want. Or if you're doing, it's perfect for indoor winter guard or drumline, because you're able to just click and move them very quickly. You have the second option for edit steps. Let's take a look at this performer here, and I want to edit the steps. This is what we had originally before we added edit path, and this actually will be each step that you're going to be editing. Well, looks like I'm in edit path mode. Let's accept this. Okay. So I'm able to edit each step individually. So as you can see here, it's going to move to each of those steps individually here during animation. So this gives you the ability to give specific locations if you want to have a larger step and a smaller step in the same transition. It's very unique. And once we get done modifying anything that we want, we're going to choose accept, and we have our custom transitions here. And I touched on this in a previous lesson, but for curved pathways, typically you want to be able to identify those on the chart. We added the ability to show your pathways for selected performers, and then we also added the ability to create an arrow from that path. So I'm going to select my performers here that have unusual path. I'm going to add arrows here. And that's going to have my pathways I outlined so they can be printed. Any questions about the adjuster tool or anything that y'all do that I might not have covered on the adjuster tool? Being how flexible that tool is, I know a lot of users do use it for different purposes. Alright, let's reset this a little bit. Okay. Let's take a look at our compound push. So let's just create a horizontal line here. Let's create a little bit longer transition, 32 counts. And let's say I wanted to rotate this 360 degrees. But I also want to push this down the field. So I've got my rotation created. It's going to be a curved path here. And I want to push that down the field. So I'm going to select my form, and I'm going to go to my push tool. We have our compound move option here. What this is going to do is it's going to take the existing pathway that we have, and it's going to keep that. So if I move my form down the field, it's going to then interpolate those pathways to keep the same type of maneuver, but shifting it into a new location. So now if I play, it's going to look like it's tumbling down the field. So the compound push maneuver gives you the ability to merge transitions. The same thing happens with, let's say I have, do a new form here. I'm going to do a little follow the leader here. Get my transition happening here. Just a little follow the leader. I can select my follow the leader that I have, and I can do my compound push. I can push it into a different location. And what it's going to do is it's going to merge that follow the leader transition with my new push. So now it's going to look like a side-winding snake, as it were. You're following the leader as well as shifting your entire form. It keeps that same transitional data to create your new maneuver. Let's see. Another example is using it with a circle, sending a wheel tumbling downfield. Degrees. This will look like we're rolling downfield backwards, a little moonwalk style. Let's change that transitional to moving this way, say run it downfield. There we go. And now we have our wheel running downfield. For those who create picture shows, you're able to do functions like that using the compound push. All right. Did we have any questions about any of the tools we've covered tonight? Any question at all? All right. Well, as I said earlier, we are going to be changing next week's episode from the traditional tools to a overview of the feature list of version 10. being that Pi Day is coming up that Saturday. If you have anything specific that you'd like to see about any of those features, we can have that touched on. Just drop us a note, Facebook or email. Until then, we will see you next time. Y'all have a wonderful evening.